Oh, hi there. Sage Canada VO2 Max Productions here with another training talk. Today we're going to talk about hill running, and I'm here in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. Behind me is Bear Peak, one of my favorite little hills to jog up. And I'm not going to talk so much about hill running form, hill running technique. You could check out my girlfriend Sandy Nightpaver's video, which I'll link to up here for that, getting into the actual biomechanics of uphill and downhill, mainly trail running, but it's also applicable to road runners as well. But what I do want to talk about today is structuring hill training or logging vertical into your training, and kind of the differences between how you would do that and what you should kind of have a perspective on when you do that. Whether you're doing any event from a flat 5K or 10K on the track or roads to half marathons or marathons on the road to especially ultra marathons, trail races, 50K and up. And I'll start off by kind of laying the premise that course profile, especially in ultras and trail races, is everything. It matters, I think, even more than the actual distance that you're running. Some 50K courses like Speed Goat run more like a flat, more runnable 50-mile course like Lake Sonoma in terms of duration. So course profile is everything. You should do everything you can to study that. And if you're running a road marathon, New York City versus Chicago, a lot different in the course profile. And hill training, I think, has a value for all runners. And it's no surprise that Arthur Lynyard had a whole phase in his training of building strength and speed by doing hills. A lot of the famous saying is that hill training is speed training in disguise. And then you can get a lot of the benefits from doing hill repeats or uphill tempo runs or even long runs on hilly terrain to benefit your flat running speed. And then for ultra runners and trail runners, obviously the up and down mechanics of training your structural, your muscles, as well as your heart and lungs is very important for the specific demands of a hilly race course. And I also realize a lot of people don't live in places like Boulder, or they don't live in the mountains. I've lived in flatland US before, and you know what? You ramp up the treadmill. Find some stairs, do repeats of stadium steps, anything like that to log vertical. Zach Miller, who won the 50-mile, Lake Sonoma 50-mile this year, he beat Rob Carr and he trained on a cruise ship, going up and down flights of stairs and doing treadmill training. And even when I set my best time at Mount Washington hill climb, I was training in Oregon at my parents' house, doing about 20,000 feet of climbing alone just on a treadmill. So it can be done. If there's a will, there's a way. And I want to kind of start off also with the premise that there's different systems being trained when you're doing any training, but especially hill training. And the first major system I'd cover is the cardiovascular system, your cardiovascular engine, your heart, your lungs, your VO2 max, your lactate threshold, things like parameters like that. And your heart and lungs don't know the difference of what you're doing. You could be running mile repeats on a flat track at 95% of your maximal heart rate, or you could be sprinting up a hill, a steep incline hill at 90% maximum heart rate, and your heart doesn't know what you're doing. There's absolutely no difference in that. So you're training the cardiovascular system always at a certain level, at a certain intensity, and breathing goes with that. And so then going into your second system, which I view as being the most important and the most applicable to hill training, is your skeletal muscular system. And this is your muscles, tendons, bones, ligaments. It could even be your muscle neurons, your fast twitch and slow twitch, intermediate twitch muscle fibers. And these do know a difference. If you're running at a certain grade on the certain percent incline on a treadmill, or you're going up rocky steps, there's little biomechanical differences that come into play here, and the way you build your musculature in your legs. Now, with faster runners, 5K, 10K flat runners, a lot of times you do more shorter hill repeats and sprints, hill sprints. It could be 10-second all-out sprints or less. They could be 400-meter, quarter-mile hill repeats. And that's going to help build push-off power, lengthen your stride, reinforce proper mechanics with knee drive, arm drive, because you kind of have to run with exaggerated form. But mainly you're building up those legs so that when you transition to flat running, you could just cruise a lot faster. And it also works your heart and lungs a little bit differently. But the main differences here are the skeletal muscular difference. And the same thing with ultra runners and trail runners. You need to get used to that pounding of going up and down hills or going up a long, steep, steady incline for miles on end. And get used to being able to have that kind of stride rate and the stride length that's going to be optimal for that kind of efficiency. And it's going to build up your quads differently. And at some point you will have to specify your training for the course profile that you're doing. And I found a lot of difficulty with this actually, because I do a wide variety of races, and getting the leg turnover versus getting the climbing power don't always go hand in hand. So it's hard to transition between the two extremes. And if you look at the biomechanics, there's a major difference if you're running up a 5% grade or a 15% grade. Just like there's a major difference if you're running on technical rocky trail, doing rocky steps up a mountain, versus if you're running on a smooth road like Mount Washington, or you're running on a treadmill like during the Trail Runner Magazine Uphill Challenge that I just did last weekend, 15% incline for 15 minutes. And your mechanics make a big role in that, and there's some of that you could kind of train yourself to change, and some of that you can't. But the idea here is to get in a good mix of shorter, faster hill repeats on a surface that's you're gonna race on, and to train the muscles in a way that you will be able to carry through on the race given its course profile and its terrain. And then the third system, of course, is your metabolism. And that's going to get revved up from doing shorter, intense workouts, whether it's track workouts or shorter hill repeats, or your fat burning, which is going to get revved up from doing long runs, maybe with some carbohydrate depletion at a more moderate intensity, 65, even 60% of your maximal heart rate. And I found that in training for ultras especially, I have to really hold myself back on some days, because I used to always just try to blast up hills at a pretty steady pace all the time, and I found that wore me out, not only at the metabolic rate, relying too much on burning carbs really fast, but also skeletal muscularly, fatiguing my muscle fibers, fatiguing the muscles that need to develop tension to be able to carry on that kind of activity over and over again. So you see a lot of trail runners, Anton Krupicka, Timothy Olson, for example, they're logging big vertical, 20,000, 30,000, even 40,000 feet of climbing a week. That kind of vertical would crush me if I did it as hard as I train on most of my intense training runs. And I know my body, myself, can't handle that. So everyone's a little bit different in that regard, and you kind of have to find your sweet spot. It's like your weekly mileage. A weekly vertical amount of feet climbing per week there's not necessarily one magic number for everyone, and it's going to depend on the course profile, which I think is the most important. So in closing, I'll touch on some workouts that you could do that I think would help most runners anywhere in the 10K to 50K or even 50-mile race range. And it would be doing a steady uphill tempo run. This could be anywhere from 20 minutes to 40 minutes, maybe even a little longer if you're pushing 80 miles a week. But I do this up Flagstaff Road here in Boulder. I do it up Magnolia Road in Boulder. I've done it up Bear Peak even, but it's not quite as steady because that's a choppy, rocky trail. But it's basically a hard aerobic effort, lactate threshold intensity, 85 to 90% of your maximum heart rate, 20 to 30 minutes at least. If it was a flat road tempo run, I'd probably go 4 or 5 miles only. Most people, 3 miles is a good distance, and you're doing that right at about 10K pace plus 15 seconds per mile, or if you're a lot faster, maybe closer to your half marathon type of pace. And it's a lactate threshold workout, bread and butter for your heart and lungs, but skeletal muscularly, you might be running 15-minute mile pace uphill, and your legs are getting trained for those mechanics, and that's the difference on that steady state run there. The other workout would be adding hills to your long run, doing long runs on rolling trails to mimic the up and down that your hip flexors will have to encounter when you're going up and down a roller coaster course like the North Face, San Francisco and Marin Headlands, or Lake Sonoma, just a few that I've done. You need to transition with the hip flexors, with the hammies and the glutes and the quads to be able to handle that kind of pounding, and your calf muscles as well. And then the other workout would be to do short hill sprints to build all-out speed. You see Brad Hudson's group here in Boulder even do short hill sprints. Track runners do this all the time. Could be a 10-second lactic hill sprint, which means you don't develop lactic acid. You're just firing creatine phosphate stores. You're going absolutely 100%. Now, you probably want to work up into that 100% sprint range, or you might pull something. but you could start at 90%, 95%. And you could start with flat strides, doing 100 meters on the track with a full recovery, 4 by 100 meters, and then building the incline into that. And you're developing muscle tension, you're firing all the muscle fibers in your legs. That rarely happens if you're an endurance runner, unless you're sprinting all out. And when you're sprinting up an incline for 10 seconds all out, you're firing 100% of your fast twitch muscle fibers, which usually would go kind of dormant for a long distance runner, and I've been guilty of that for sure. So you're developing those neuromuscular pathways between your brain and your muscles to be more efficiency at a really high-end speed. What's that going to mean? It's going to translate to all sub-maximal speeds, that you're going to improve your efficiency and your form at, you know, your tempo run pace, at your long run pace, at your VO2 max velocity. And so that's kind of the idea behind that, is developing that knee lift, that power, and that kind of drive through activating all the muscle fibers in your leg. And you know, you could throw in some intermediate repeats in there as well. You could develop workouts where you're going maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute at a pretty high intensity up a hill, and doing those repeats and kind of walking the recovery back down if you have to go up and down. And you know, you could flood the system with lactic acid doing that. It could be an anaerobic type of stimulus, or it could be a VO2 max type of stimulus. And for a lot of endurance runners, capping off that VO2 max, getting that heart rate up to 100% of maximal stroke volume is really important, because it's going to raise your lactate threshold intensity as well, hopefully, and help you, you know, diffuse the lactic acid if you have to encounter any hard hills during your race, whether it's a half marathon or an ultra. And so I think those workouts are all kind of important in implementing hill training, and obviously there's a lot of variables at play with all of this, but I just kind of wanted to touch on some of the basics that I thought were important today. And again, I really appreciate all the views, all the shares, and all the subscriptions. So thanks again for watching, and feel free to comment below with any future training talk topics that you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for subscribing, and thanks for all the thumbs up too. Really appreciate the support. I couldn't do it without you guys, and I look forward to producing more VO2 Max productions. Ah, dang. The cacti went through my waka.